Good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. My name is Doug Brunke. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. We have a very special partnership to announce. It's with Blaine Bartlett, and today with he and Dolan White will be talking through a really interesting and hopefully beneficial seminar for all of you called Lead from Anywhere: How Mindset Drives Global Results. We know as the global tribe that mindset is so important, that we have a positive view, that we have a global view, that we have a view that is oriented toward service, toward others, and listening, and a variety of different aspects of mindset. Thunderbird calls it global mindset. And so if you're ever interested in learning more about it, they actually teach what global mindset is. Today, it's more around leadership and how steps you can take on how you become more effective as a leader. And I can't think of anybody better to tell that to us other than Blaine and Doland. Blaine has over 4 decades of experience working with some of the most successful companies in the world. He's globally recognized, he's a global icon, and he's sought after for leadership development all over the world. We were just talking about his next visit to Japan and a course that he's been teaching there for decades. Dolan White has only 3 decades of experience, but that's a lot. And he's also been very steeped in the methodology that we'll be talking about today from the receiver side and organizations that he's run that have received the leadership training that Blaine has created. And he subsequently has become an expert. He is an expert now in helping teams develop this mindset to be able to be aligned much better with their mission. Hopefully, today's session will get you a little bit closer to your mission and also give you some ideas and thoughts to work on to be better at leadership and to have greater impact. So, Blaine, I turn it over to you. I'm really honored and pleased that we have this relationship between your organization and Global Chamber. It's just an honor and pleasure, and we look forward to learning more today. Thank you.
Great. Doug, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity, to be working with you. Dolan and I both are very excited about, you know, the possibility that this arrangement, this relational dynamic, actually, I think, provides for Global Chamber. What we're going to be looking at today, and I'll just kind of give you a very high level overview here, is driving global results, but kind of bringing it down granularly, in the chapters, just kind of how do you actually build the chapter. So there's a scaling component to all of this, but also we want to have an invitation on the table here for you to look at yourself. Yeah, how do I lead myself in the process of scaling either the chapters in which I'm a member, or the businesses in which I'm actually involved. So that's what we want to be looking at here. And as Doug mentioned, both Dolan and I, we've got decades spent looking at this question of leadership. And I'm going to just grab a screen here real quick. We're going to move through this relatively quickly. Want to be sure that we are actually giving everybody the information they need. And I'm assuming everybody can see the screen here. Dolan, thumbs up, we can see it. Okay, good, good. So our focus here is going to be on leadership in this conversation. And just to kind of give you a sense of how this is going to work, Dolan and I have got some stuff that we want to share with you, just some content and material. We've also got a little exercise that we want to have you take some time to work with. And it's a self-assessment exercise, that is organized around part of our specific leadership model. And the intent here would be for you to just, perhaps have a little bit of learning, take place, not just listen to two old white guys, talking, um, and be able to apply some of this stuff to what it is that you're doing. And near the end of our time together here, we'll have some room for Q&A, but we also want to just position an offer that Doug and Dolan and I have been exploring in terms of how we can actually enhance the effectiveness of leadership in the global chamber environment. So that's one of the things that we're going to be positioning literally right at the end today. There's an invitation for you to participate in something. So I'll just drive this question home. When we think about leadership, yeah, Hannibal came across the Alps with his elephants, and most leadership conversations revolve around command and control modalities. How do I get people to do what I need them to do that they don't want to do? I mean, all of those sorts of things. Yeah, yeah, how do we define leadership? I've spent literally 40 plus years working this question. What is leadership and how do we actually leverage it more effectively? And over the course of that time, the research that I've done, and this is also true with Dolan, we've started looking at what are the key attributes that seem to be present when highly effective leaders are moving their organizations. And this is the definition that actually contains our 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 sense of what that is. It's the activity of influencing, which takes command and control out of the dynamic here. Influencing, it's a state of being, leadership presence. Now, why this is important in today's world is very simply, there's up to 6 generations of people involved in most businesses today. Yeah, this is the first time in history we've had this many generational cohorts. And each one of these cohorts have got a different expectation about how they're going to be participating. From a leadership perspective, how do I actually work with this? It can be crazy making. And this is where the influencing piece comes into play very strongly. So I'm going to influence other people in order to co-create. Co-creation. It's my idea. Leaders move possibility into reality. That's the idea. They expose possibility as something that could be done. It's their idea initially. How does it get translated? How does it move from my mind to the mind of the people that I actually need to have execute? So that co-creation piece is actually an ownership transference. People begin to do things because they want to, because they now see how it benefits them. And it's the tangible difference between compliance-based behavior and committed behavior. When you have co-created this ideal in people's minds, they now want to do it, and you will experience committed action, which translates into innovation, risk-taking, creativity, accelerated movement. A lot of dynamics come into play with that. Now, what's interesting here is that next piece, which has to do with coordinated movement. Leadership's the activity of influencing others to co-create coordinated movement. We are not looking at the absence of conflict here. But when you start moving people in your organizations, when you start scaling, you move into unknown territory, places that we haven't been before. And as a very clear consequence of that is we don't know the safe path to do this. People have preferences. The old organizational development joke is we went away and designed the perfect organization and we screwed it up when we put people in it. People have preferences about how things are done. So this coordinated movement piece from a leadership perspective is how do you leverage and apply conflict in an appropriate fashion? Conflict is always going to be present. It's always going to be present when movement is going on. Now, here's a way to think about this. Just quickly rub your hands together. Just kind of do this. Audience participation. You notice that there's some heat that begins to be generated there. Conflict generates heat. Another word for conflict is friction. Conflict generates heat. Heat is actually used appropriately, a cleansing mechanism. It burns away stuff that is not necessary any longer. Enough heat will generate light. Light illuminates possibilities. It illuminates ways that we've never thought of acting, thinking, or behaving before. So you want to be able to actually leverage conflict, not eliminate it. That's what the coordinated movement piece is about. And then the last element here has to do with in pursuit of a worthy ideal. This is not a 10% growth in market share. This is not a 5% or 7% increase in revenue. That may be meaningful from a business perspective, but what's a worthy ideal? This speaks to the distinction between motivation and inspiration. Motivation is the carrot stick. Pursuit of something, well, here's the carrot or here's the stick to make sure you keep moving. You got to keep coming back to the trough. You got to keep reinventing that. Inspiration, when you tap into this worthy ideal, now you're speaking about what matters to people, what matters to me. It's that personal link that creates emotional engagement. So when we take this definition and we look at it through that through the lens of what it's intended to do, what you end up doing is creating movement that by and large is something that we call elegant. And elegant isn't sartorial elegance where you look good. Elegant is minimal unintended consequences. That's what we're looking at doing. And the highly effective leaders that we've actually researched, these are elegant leaders. It's not that things don't go sideways. They do, but they are elegant in how they go about approaching causing movement, because at the end of the day, that's what leaders do, is they cause movement. So we're positioning this definition as a starting point. When we start looking at how we develop leaders, this whole leadership development conversation, there's a universe that leaders actually work within. And this leadership universe, parts of it are very familiar to people. Most leadership development activities are focused on the why, the what, and the how. This is the vision, the strategy, and the tactics. And that's almost the exclusive domain of most leadership development conversations, most leadership development programs, is let's clarify the vision, let's make sure we've got the strategy identified, and then let's go out and execute, the tactics, all of that stuff. What we're doing is we're saying that's not enough. Now, here's a real interesting data point. When you start thinking about why people get engaged in things, and I mean participate fully, what they do is they participate in ways that are meaningful to them. All behavior is generated out of meaning. All behavior is generated from meaning. And that's where this mindset domain starts to come into play. Now, one of the holy grails of almost every organization is emotional engagement, participation. Gallup has done surveys, and you're probably all familiar with this, but they have done surveys for at least 25 years that I'm familiar with about how engaged is the workforce. Globally, the workforce is disengaged. About 87 to 92% of the workforce is emotionally disengaged from the work that they're doing. And what's interesting is globally, businesses and organizations spend about $42 billion on trying to change that metric of 87% disengagement. And that has been a spend, $42 billion. And this data comes from McKinsey, the global consulting firm. That spend has not produced much variance in that disengagement score. We're missing something. And what we're missing has to do with what we're paying attention to in our leadership development strategies, in the ways that we actually go about creating movement, with organizations. So when I'm looking at this slide set, this leadership universe, our work is organized on these bottom two areas: mindset and spirit. Mindset and spirit. And why we focus here has to do with something that is fascinating, and I'm going to just focus on this mindset area. It's a set of habituated beliefs, attitudes, and assumptions that drive people's behaviors. Literally, and this may not be new news to anybody, but literally 95% of all behavior is generated out of mindset. The problem with this is that mindset tends to be subconscious, it's out of sight, and literally out of awareness. So the work that we do, And this is where Doug got very intrigued with some of the conversation that we were having about what possibilities might emerge out of our collaboration with each other, is if we can effectively work with mindset, what possibility could emerge out of that when people begin recognizing that there's other things out here that we could be doing that are beyond vision, strategy, and tactics. Yeah, we can set these lofty visions, but what gets kicked in is this mindset, and you'll hear people say, well, that's not who we are, or I don't know that I can pull that off, or we don't have the resources that we need. These are all mindset objections, and they're based on all kinds of historical things, and they're habituated sets of beliefs, attitudes, and assumptions through which an individual perceives and interacts with the world. I'm not the kind of person who, we're not the kind of organization that would. What limits us is not who we'd like to be. What limits us is who we think we're not. And that's where we actually do a large body of our work. So this is where we're actually going to be organizing, the entire conversation in the work that we're doing with the chamber. So I'm going to just stop here real quick. Dolan, do you have anything that you'd like to toss in here? I don't want to hog the limelight the whole time here.
I'll officially toss in a ditto. I think in working, having been a CEO, multiple roles in a lot of organizations, and one of the things that I think that we have a tendency to kind of go back to the leadership universe and then quickly why the focus is on mindset. From a practical perspective, when we focus on leading a company, it's easy for us to fall in, I call it a trap. We can fall into the trap of thinking in that the top three layers, vision, tactics, strategy, whatever order you want to put them in. Some people get them inverted and some don't. But it is the mindset that enables the team, that empowers your team. And empowerment really is just giving people permission to try. And
Yeah.
Blaine's going to talk a little bit about trust in a couple of minutes. But when you're empowering your team, it's that giving them permission to try, to accomplish, to go fail. In there's the Japanese method of Kaizen. You were talking about going back to Japan, right? With continuous improvement, or the Zen method of fall 6, rise 7. But it's that willingness to try, which is what true empowerment is all about. And that's why when we focus on mindset, and I'll raise my right hand, young CEO, president of an international consultancy, and I was blessed. I got to do a lot of work in Russia and other places in the world, and very focused on vision, tactics, strategy, and couldn't figure out why we couldn't break the barrier to shift our company and take it up to the next level. This is way back in the 90s, pre-gray hair. And it was that mindset piece, that shift into the mindset piece, where everybody becomes aligned and you build that trust. So that's my plug on why we're focusing on mindset, and we're not talking about the spiritual component of business today, but that mindset, that nougat layer, is critically important to move forward.
So what we're going to be looking at here is how do we move from the focal point that is typical, which is strategy, tactics, vision, those sorts of pieces, and drop into mindset. And the way we do that is through a very specific model that Dolan and I have developed over our time in working with clients. And this is called the ACT model. Leaders cause movement. They cause movement by the ways that they act. And movement occurs in an organization, in all kinds of different ways. Now, here's, again, I've mentioned this before. All behavior is linked to meaning. Meaning is the driver of all behavior. Most meaning-making processes are out of sight, out of mind. They're in that mindset area. So we wanted to be able to, in the work that we do with our leaders, find a way to drop into and explore what is the operating mindset. And that's where this ACT model comes into play here. And just very simple, it's an acronym. Awareness, it's the foundation of emotional intelligence, first of all, but also awareness. In the way that we work with our clients, it has to do with beginning to notice what you're noticing. And here's what I mean by that. Energy will follow attention. It never follows intention. Vision, strategy, tactics is focused on intentionality. Mindset work is focused on where is the attention going? And because attention is linked to energetic movement. So the idea of squirrel, I mean, you set a vision out here and all of a sudden something happens and everybody's attention is drawn over here, but they don't notice that they're really noticing that. The attention has moved and the energy has moved. And they keep saying, well, we're going in this direction, but you end up noticing behavior that is taking you in absolutely the opposite direction that you intended. So awareness is a foundational piece here, and it really is noticing what are the thoughts? Where did that thought come from? We can't do that because, well, where did that come from? That belief? I mean, those sorts of things. We asked for this behavior, we got that behavior. What was the source of that behavior that we got that we didn't want? We start noticing, we start practicing ways to unbundle and begin to actually discover ways of doing things differently. The power of awareness is that it generates choice. It uncovers choices that I did not think that I had, possibilities that I didn't recognize were present for us or for me. Context, moving into the ACT model here a little further, context is a meaning-making device. A very simple example, and I use this one all the time, and it has to do with the difference between the power of a business case argument and the power of out of awareness mindset context. Now, it's a real rough metaphor, but I think everybody can appreciate it. You wake up one morning and you have this brilliant idea, and you are the kind of person that really values efficiency in your life. And you've been kind of wrestling with, okay, how do I get more time in my day? Well, you decided that, eureka, okay, I'm going to shorten the time between the time that I get out of bed and the time that I get my first cup of tea or my first cup of coffee in the morning. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to move my bed into the kitchen. Now, just assume for a moment, now just stick with me on this, but just assume for a moment that your bed will actually fit in the kitchen. You've got this brilliant idea, you've done the math, and you go, I can save 15 steps easily, aggregated over an entire year. Look at the time saving I've got. This is crazy. This is wonderful. So you've got this business case made up in your mind about why this change makes sense. Your husband, your wife, your significant other comes home at the end of the day and they see a bed in the kitchen. The first thing they're going to do is they're going to likely say, what in the hell are you thinking? That is the stupid, get that bed out of here. And you go, no, let me explain. Here's the business case. And they're going, yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. The bed does not belong here. Put it back in the bedroom. What's going on is the context of kitchen does not allow for content bed to, actually belong. Because the context hasn't been shifted, the content gets kicked out. This is what happens with change initiatives all the time in organizations. The business case is defined, it's implemented into the organization, but nobody has shifted the context. Nobody has attended to the contextual framing that this new stuff happens to take place within. And it's new content, it gets kicked out. I spent about 12 years working with Nokia, and I led a major chunk of their leadership development initiative for that 12 years, starting when they were selling rubber boots, tires, big cables, farm implements, television sets, all of that stuff. When they started doing things differently from a telephony point of view, context needed to be shifted in order for that change to focus on telephony to actually, get sticky and hold. Now, there's a whole backstory to all of that, but that's essentially what we were looking at is how do you shift context? Context shapes how people interpret what's going on. The problem with change is never the change itself. It's the disruption to existing relationships that the change causes. Everything in an organization is relational, and context is the relational dynamic. People have relationship with work process as well as with each other. They have relationship with goals and objectives. they have relationship with. There's two questions that are going on all the time in people's minds. Who am I? Where do I belong? You introduce change, and these are context questions. Who am I? Where do I belong in this organization? That's what leaders actually need to be paying attention to. You don't do that until awareness is in place. You start noticing what's the context. Then how do you go about doing this? Well, communication. Yeah, communication is not blah, blah, blah. That's not the way it works. Communication is the process of working out common meaning. And I mean the process of working out common meaning with each other. What does this actually mean? Because that's going to drive behavior. How do you go about doing that? You have to master the process. The purpose of communication is to produce a result. The purpose of leadership is to produce a result. Communication mastery determines leadership mastery. There is no question about that. Communication mastery. How do you master the meaning-making process so that people go, ah, that's what this is about. Ah, that's what's in it for me. That aha moment is what we're looking for. Then you end up having commitment, not compliance. And there are some very specific litmus tests, if you will, that indicate whether commitment is in place. And we talk all about that, and we actually work with that so that you can begin to understand how you actually generate that. And then the final piece in this ACT model has to do with a recognition that everything is about relationship. Everything is about relationship in some way, shape, or form. Trust is the foundation of every relationship. How do you create trust? How do you recover it when it's been broken? How do you leverage trust? What does trust actually mean in different scenarios and situations? Most people don't understand what trust actually is. I cannot tell you the number of organizations I've been consulting with over this last 40 years where we have a trust issue. And it's usually masked as we have a communication problem. No, you don't have a communication problem. You've got a trust issue. What do you mean by that? That's a good question. Let's become aware of what we mean by trust. Is it competency? Is it character? Is it, what is it? Yeah. Those sorts of things start to come into the conversation. So this ACT model becomes the framework through which our developmental work is done with organizations and with individuals. That's what we want to bring to the table here is a structure that you can count on, because this thing has been tried and true. I've used this thing for 40 years. Literally, this is not theoretical. This is very tangible. I've used this with Nokia, with Starbucks, with Apple, with Microsoft, with AstraZeneca. I mean, we can just go down the line here with the clients with whom I've worked. And this ACT model is literally the leverage model that we actually spend time with here. So we're going to do a little self-assessment exercise, and I'll just stop my share and turn it over to my partner in crime here, Doland. Before we do that, do anybody got a question or anything like that they'd like to bring to the table? Because this was kind of a data dump. Give everybody time to breathe here for just a moment. Does this make sense? I guess would be, I'll just start with, is it appearing logical? I mean, it is,
Monday,
so
wore them out.
warm out already here.
Wore them out.
Okay.
Don't hesitate. If you have thoughts or questions, don't drop them in the chat. I'll watch chat.
Yeah, just drop them in the chat. We'll watch it.
As we're going along.
So, Dolan,
So
we've got a
Jim,
little
if you
thing
would,
for you to
if you
play
would
with here.
do me a favor, Jim, and drop the PDF into the chat. And I'm going to share my screen just briefly. There we go. And if everybody can grab that PDF, I'll show you you're going to grab it and open it, but let me open it up for you just real quickly and walk through it a little bit. We're going to take just a few minutes for this exercise. I think Blaine, about 7 minutes maybe. 7 seems to be the magic number today. And on the very first page, and it's a lot of when we talk about frameworks and processes, and there's a lot more that goes behind what Blaine was talking about this morning on. So now that you've got it, what do you do with it? How do you actually implement it? And but this very first page is just it's a summary of what ACCCT is, which is right off of the slide. So yeah, and keep this for your reference. The intention for this worksheet is for us to take a little bit of a few minutes just to do just kind of a self-assessment. And I'm going to, pardon the scroll, I'll scroll relatively slowly so that I don't cause any dizziness here as we go through that. But we took each of the domains from the model, from the ACCT model, and this is your assessment. It's an opportunity, and this is best response, top of mind, top of heart, spirit that you recognize. And through each of these categories, let's take a few minutes and just have you go through and look at these questions and check mark the ones that you feel you're competent in or areas where you want to work. But the intention is to give you some areas of focus. And the areas of focus, and one of the, leaders self-assess, and we self-assess pretty frequently. And one of the things that we'll do is on the last page, just take a moment and maybe answer some of these questions. And in 7 minutes, we won't have time to do all of this, but we want to leave this in your care so that you can apply it to you and your leadership thinking, and then also use it with your team and think about your business. And don't hesitate to share this in any way, but look at this and think about which leadership dimension is your strongest. Why is it your strongest? Where do you need improvement? And there's no right or wrong, by the way. There's only muscles that need exercise. And those muscles change over time. And then how do your strengths in one dimension support your team or organization? What impact could improving your weakest dimension have on your leadership effectiveness? What dimension do you want to focus on, and then a goal on the dimension? And as I mentioned, I'll stop sharing because you guys all have this. This isn't something that we'll get through all of this in 7 minutes, but it's an opportunity to start that process. It's important as leaders that we think about where are we, and we have a construct to think in to measure against. And that gives us that ability to look at where do I strengthen my capability to empower my team, to empower myself. How do I become a better leader? So I'm going to set a 7 minute timer, and I'll give a couple of minute warning, and then a 1 minute warning, and then a little bit of a countdown. But if you'd like to go ahead and get started on that, we'll just take a pause for a moment. About 2 more minutes. One more minute. About 15 seconds. There you go. There's the official timer.
So, observations, what did you notice? If anything? Yeah. This is a very simple self-assessment. Any surprises? Any thing get confirmed?
This is Samia.
Yes.
Hello?
Samia. Yes.
Yes. From going through the checklist, I'm in a new journey where I'm starting to grow my business and bring in staff and build a team. I've been independent over the majority of my career and on the other side of the table. And this is a great opportunity to, I guess, form I would say a culture to operate at this in this way. So that's what I saw. I said, okay, well, I can use this as an opportunity to as a direction of how I'm dealing with others and find the strengths and weaknesses and grow from there.
Perfect.
So it's eye-opening, definitely eye-opening.
Good. Yeah. When we're looking at scaling, whether it's a chapter or a business or any kind of an organization, actually, breakdowns in scaling almost never have to do with strategy. It has to do with mindset. And that's where the actual leverage on something like this begins to pay dividends, is when you can begin to recognize there's something in play here that I wasn't really noticing before. And this is true. You mentioned the word culture as well.
Yeah.
In an organization, mindset takes the guise of culture. I mean, that, every organization has got a cultural component to it. Most organizations don't curate culture. It just happens organically. And as a consequence of it just kind of developing, and they try to put something new into it, and culture will spit it out because it's not tuned for it.
Right. Right.
So to your point, Samia, I think, when you start building the organization, attending to what's the cultural dynamic I want to have in place here as well. Yeah, that was really when I was doing a lot of work with
Good thought.
Starbucks. I spent about 5 years with their store development group. Uh, Culture was one thing that we paid an incredible amount of attention to as they started looking at expanding. And this goes back a bunch of years when they were really expanding hugely. And that kind of growth required a very different mindset. Thank you.
Yeah, it's hard to have people adapt to the culture because they come in with their own mindset of how their own perception per se.
Yep.
So it's very, like I would say, like a Chick-fil-A. They have this sort of presence and the way they greet. So it creates, I would say, everybody gets in sync of how they want to present, and it's grooming. Like over time, you find yourself maybe saying it as well. You go
Yeah.
buy something and you're doing it as well. And different brands, they have that sort of that allow you to conform within their the culture that they've created. And I want to be intentional
That's
with that,
perfect.
growing my
Awesome.
business.
Yeah, I spent 12 years working with the design firm IDEO. Worked with a number of their partners. And
Yeah.
one of the partners that I worked with was in charge of expanding internationally into both, Europe as well as Asia. And the key question they had in front of them was, how do we curate our design culture that has made us successful to this point? How do we curate that in these different environments? How do we actually, because it's not one size fits all. That has to be modified. But it was modified through intentionality, through awareness primarily. And then you're beginning to make some changes and some shifts without throwing the baby out with the bathwater, sort of a thing.
Yeah.
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 Good
Yeah,
stuff.
great.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Samia.
Yeah, great
You're
statement.
welcome. Thank
I was
you.
blessed. I got to spend about 18 years wandering through Disney,
Yes.
going through all their leadership academies and working with their teams. And to your point, Samia, you said something, the Chick-fil-A philosophy. It is the little movements, the little things that make a difference. And when you instill that in, this is an opportunity as you're instilling that into your culture. It's you'll accomplish some amazing results doing that now.
Yes.
So
Thank you.
good noticing. Anyone else? We will call on you.
Audience participation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move into how do you do this? Okay, it's one thing to have this awareness, and this document that you just completed gives a bit of awareness to where might I want to start focusing. And one of the things that we are very clear about in the work that we do is that anytime a leader or anytime an individual decides to make a move, trying to do it on their own becomes really difficult. And I think probably the the most obvious example of that would be New Year's resolutions. What people make. Yeah, I'm going to lose 10 pounds by, or 20 pounds by. I'm going to stop this, or I'm going to start that. And that lasts for about 6 weeks. And then people look up and it's kind of business as usual. Nothing fundamental has ever really shifted, unless they've gotten themselves in a position where they've got people around them that are supporting them. They've got a tribe of some sort. They've got people that they're working with that are consistently keeping this thing moving with them. And data shows that about 20% of developmental processes undertaken by an individual without support actually, it's only about 20% of the time is it successful. When there's a support mechanism in place, it's upwards to 60 to 90% successful. And it's that component that we want to actually share with you here, because we've got a way of actually structuring what you're looking at doing here. And I'm going to just share this screen very quickly. And this is what we brought to the table with Doug, and what we actually started fleshing out with how could we actually enhance how effective the leaders are within the global chamber environment. And what we're going to propose here, and this is an invitation, is to have you explore the viability, the utility of a leadership mindset mastermind program that we've developed. This is the 4th year that we are doing this. This is the 5th year. We're moving into the 5th year of doing this. We've had this running for 4 years now. It's a curated community. There is a mastermind cadence to it, and you'll notice when you read this, mastermind cadence, 1 hour weekly rhythm sustained for 52 weeks. How does mindset get developed? It gets developed through repetition, typically. That's how mindset gets developed. Repetition and reinforcement, repetition and reinforcement. As soon as it becomes habituated, then it starts to starts moving into automaticity. It starts, becoming just part of how I actually execute. Studies have shown that, roughly by the time humans are 30 years of age, 95% of their behavior, and this goes back to that very first slide I showed, 95% of our behavior is driven by our mindset. It's the habituated learning that we basically accumulated through repetition in our life. So there's a mastermind cadence that's designed very specifically to interrupt, to notice and interrupt. What are the patterned ways of behaving that people are engaging in? You interrupt the pattern, it makes it possible for something new to kick in. Until the pattern is recognized and interrupted, nothing changes. Dolan and I teach this program every week. You'll get more of Dolan and Blaine than you ever wanted, probably. But we are facilitating this thing every single week. We break it into 2 components. One is a weekly meeting that's about an hour and a quarter long, where we actually teach some new content that's designed very specifically to notice and interrupt patterns. And then there's a second component to it that takes place that same week, which is the actual mastermind component, where we take the large cohort, break it into smaller groups of about 3 to 4 people, and that gets rotated over the course of the full year. But that 3 to 4 person cohort becomes the actual working mastermind component. It's mentor-led. Like I mentioned, we've run this program for 4 years. We've got people that have been through the program 4 times. They keep coming back. They're now at a point where we're going, okay, we're going to put you guys to work. So these are the mentors that actually lead these mastermind cohorts. And the idea here is it sidecars onto your life. It doesn't impose anything into your life. Everybody's busy. Everybody's got stuff going on. So we wanted to make this as easy as it could possibly be in terms of being able to facilitate shifts and transformation. You define what it is that you're targeting. You define the way that you actually integrate it and work with it. So curated community, we are very selective. It's invitation only. Mastermind cadence, 52 weeks, mentor guided. We've got, it's just not Dolan and myself. We've got folks set up, and it's your agenda. Yeah, we've got the structure. You bring the content. This is essentially how this is going to work. Here is a roadmap, and I'm not going to go through this. These slides will be available to you, but this is basically the roadmap for the 52 weeks. Months 1 through 3, dedicated to focusing on awareness. That is the foundational piece. Month 4 and 5, focused on context. How do you develop it? How do you notice it? How do you leverage it? Month 6 through 8, communication mastery. 3 months just on the topic of communication. Not how do you speak, not how you can give a talk from stage, but how do you create meaning? How do you generate meaning? Month 9 through 10, commitment. How do you engender it? How do you work with it? How do you embody it? Key piece here. How do you embody commitment? People are going to continue to look at you as symbols of what it is that you say that you want to have, do, or be. Are you an embodied example of that? Are you an exemplar? And then month 10 and 12, 10 through 12, 10, 11, and 12, 3 months, looking at the nature of trust. How do you use it to create alignment and sustain alignment in the organization? And how do you use it to leverage effectively and appropriately conflict? Conflict can be one of the greatest tools that you have if you know how to work with it well. So this is the roadmap. Dr. White, anything that you want to add to that?
Just in short, quickly,
Yeah,
that
quickly.
quickly, it really is. It's the key word I wanted to point out is journey. It is a journey together, and that's why we approach this as this is a curated group. We work in cohorts, and it gets, by the time we've been together at the end of the year, by the time you cross the body for the end of the year, which is why some of the folks have been with us 3 or 4 years back to back to back to back. It's an intimate experience where we begin to understand the challenges that we all face. And one of the components of any business is when you mess it up when you put people inside of it. And there are those challenges that occur because of that. So it becomes an intimate group where we're able to actually not only in the mastermind with the framework, with the method that we teach on how to apply it and implement it, not just the principles, but actually by working together, this becomes a very, very close group. And I still find just this weekend, Blaine, we hadn't talked about this, a couple of the folks that haven't been in the mastermind for a couple of years still talk, still ping me, still are working together. So that's really the intention behind this, is to create that structure that you're not just in a mastermind, but you're part of a community, and this becomes a lifelong experience, because it is a journey. Leadership is a journey.
Yeah. And most masterminds are 3 days, 2 to 3 days per weekend at a resort area, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The way we're working with this is it's a recognition of mindset and the power of mindset and what it takes to actually curate a mindset that supports the objectives that we're setting up for ourselves and for our people. How do we scale? How do we scale our business? How do we scale our chapter? It's not a question of strategy. It's a question of mindset.
Right.
So for the sake of what? I mean, for us, we know the value of it. I've been doing this. Dolan and I both have been doing this. This is the 5th year. Here's a couple of takeaways. Strengthen your leadership capacity. Success in life is a function of developing the capacity to continuously start over. Sustainable success is defined by developing the capacity to continuously start over. The mindset that prevents most people from doing that is something that needs to be examined. How do you continuously start over? So it's not just small iterations of what went before. For most people, their lives end up becoming and their organizations becoming incremental. Let's do a 7% improvement, 5% improvement. Let's get a 10% improvement. We'll really stretch. That's boring. It's boring. It does not inspire people. How do you start over in a way that actually transforms and produces something quantifiably different? That's what we're looking to produce here. Leadership development from action, or from idea into action. This is proven. So there, you can expect to be doing stuff here that is actually tangible. This book over my shoulder here, The Leadership Mindset. This is a curricula guide that we'll be working with. It's very actionable. It's very structured, measurable business results. We're looking at how do you scale? That's the intent. How do you scale your effectiveness as a leader? And it's the difference that makes the difference. 95% of all behavior, yours and your team's, is driven by mindset, and most people don't have a clue about what it is for themselves and their organizations. When you begin to explore that, that's the difference. That's the difference that makes the difference. So our invitation here is to check this out. I mean, literally to check this out. Next session begins in 2 weeks. So there is some, urgency around this. We do this, on an annual basis. Going to start June 30th, 9 o'clock Pacific time. We limit the size of the cohort. We limit the size. There's no more than 20 people, that we're going to be working with here. Investment is $20,000. And there's a lot of ways that we can actually facilitate how that payment happens. So don't be put off by the number. The number is just a number. We'll work with you on whatever basis we need to work. But however, the key here is this last piece: schedule a conversation with Doland and or myself. What we're looking to do here is having a conversation with you about, is this a fit for you? Is this something that legitimately can make a difference for you? What is it that you're targeting? What is it that you want? What is it that you'd like to have happen? That's what we want to have made available here. So you can't sign up for the mastermind, but you can sign up to have a conversation with Doland and myself, and we'll just kind of figure out, is it a good fit? If it's a great fit, then great. We'll facilitate what needs to be facilitated to make it happen for you. If it's not a good fit at this point in time, that's going to be fine too, but at least you'll understand, what are some other options that you may be able to use. Because our intent is that you have, and this is the conversation we've had with Doug in the last month here. How do we develop extraordinary leaders? That's what we want to be able to do. And this is one of the ways that we think is probably one of the most effective mechanisms that we've actually worked with. So this scheduling link, this will take you to the landing page for the mastermind, gives you some data on what it is. But there's also, as you click, the only button available on there, it will send you to a scheduling sheet. That we'll get a little ping that says you want to talk to us. So that's the next step for you, is to figure out a way to have a conversation with us. So I'm
And
going to
it's
stop
in the
the share
chat.
here. Pardon?
And I put it in the chat.
You put it in the chat, okay? And so did I. So there you go.
Boom. There you go.
We got it both places here. Mastermind interview link. So, questions? Ghazal, I see that you have to run. Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Gazal.
Thank you.
Thank you
And
so
I know that we're at
much.
the,
Have a great
go ahead,
day.
please. Marlene?
Yep. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Thanks,
Have a great
Marlene.
absolutely.
day.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye-bye.
We'll just kind of hang around here for a little bit if you got any questions and answers. I know we're at the top of the hour. Okay, Doug, back to you.
I got lost in the chat area, and I was
Okay.
digging out. Thank you for sharing all of that. You've been doing the mastermind now for 5 years.
This is the 5th year,
This
yes.
is the 5th year.
Yeah. What would be one example that you could point to that would say, it changed everything? I think the last time you mentioned an example of that, but I'm sure there's countless ones. Just one example to leave us with before we close the room.
Well, I'll just kind of circle back on the one we used last. That's I think the most generic. Yeah, a company that had, it was growing through acquisition. It was a manufacturing company, growing through acquisition, and they would acquire smaller firms around the country. And each of these firms had their own culture. Each of these firms had their own way of working. Each of these firms had been around for, in some cases, 30 plus odd years. The fellow that was in the mastermind, and he's been in for 3 years now, was the chief operating officer. And his charter was, how do we have to create a unified company without throwing the baby out with the bath? And so the ACT model came into play very strongly with him. He needed to develop some leaders, in each of these organizations, these disparate organizations, that were aligned with the global sense of what this, what the parent organization was actually about. He had different people. I mean, he was younger than a lot of the guys and a lot of the actually women that were in some of these manufacturing areas. So his presence, his state of being, how did he influence these people? So he spent a fair amount of time just looking at how do I develop myself so that when I walk in the room, they're actually going to be positioned to listen in a way that they typically wouldn't have been positioned to listen, because I'm taking command and control and putting it by the side. These folks were used to being talked at, and he was actually looking, how do I invite them to participate? So the net of it is highly successful at the end of the, well, he was in the program for 3 years. He reported some great results as a consequence of this. It really worked out well for him. He and his team were noticing things that they hadn't noticed before. And as a consequence of that, we're able to begin to identifying different ways from a strategy perspective and from a tactics perspective that they could begin, becoming more or drive cycle times down, become more effective in terms of allocation of resources across, across the parent organization itself. So we're looking at collaboration, that whole notion of coordinated movement and co-creation started to come into play. So it wasn't just isolated silos. They were actually beginning to create a different identity for themselves. Who am I? Where do I belong?
Brilliant. Thank you very much. As someone who has been spending the last year and particularly the last couple of months working on leadership from a variety of sources, I'm just really inspired by your past work and the work that we're suggesting here that others consider being involved with. Just so honored and pleased that we're collaborating in this way, and looking forward to working with you going forward, both Blaine and Doland. Thank you for your time today. Thanks everybody for your time, and we'll see you next time. Be in touch.
Thank you. We'll circle back with you a little bit later today. Okay?
That sounds great.
Okay, Doug, thanks. Thank you, everybody. Greatly appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you, and hope you found this valuable. Look forward to speaking with you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jem, for organizing. Appreciate it.
Thank
And-
you.
Thank you, guys.
Great.
Take care.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye.